got Thanksgiving coming up, right? Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
We got Thanksgiving. Yeah. That's exciting. Man, Thanksgiving, we have so much to be grateful for and to give thanks for. Man, you know, whatever it is, there's so many things, but this is a church. So I guess I have to be churchy and, you know, I'm going to give you something to be grateful for today and to be thankful for. And I'm excited about that. I'm gonna make the gospel exciting for you, right? Because I'm a pastor, you know, there's so many things to be grateful for, and, you know, whatever it is, like family, whatever, something you might have, or, but man, you know, for that stuff, you can go to the Today Show or, you know, whatever to you know, really soak in all of that. But we're in a church. This is a church, man, and we're mandated and we're focused on the gospel, and man, that's what I want to do. I want to make us thankful for the gospel, for Jesus and what he has done on the cross, and I hope you're excited about that, man. It never gets old. Every Sunday morning, you should be coming in here and you should be leaving excited about the gospel and the sweetness and the grace of the gospel. You know, if you come to know me, you would learn that I'm afraid of the deep sea. I'm afraid of the deep sea. I have a fear of the deep sea. I won't go on a cruise. I won't do it. It kind of upsets my wife a little bit because, you know, she wants to go on a cruise and I just won't do it. I think I saw Castaway and I was like, nope, not happening, not happening. But hey, I like learning and watching movies about the deep sea and all that stuff. My dad, he actually served in the Navy back in the 70s during Vietnam, and he was posted on the USS John F. Kennedy, which is like this giant aircraft carrier, and he did that for a few years and out in the Mediterranean Sea. Man, so I loved learning about that as a kid, and just all the things that come along with that. And listen, man, if I lived in the 1400s, I would not be like an explorer. I wouldn't have been the first European to come to America. That wouldn't have been me, right? It got me thinking, though, about this text today. You know, sailing in the middle of an ocean, when you think about it, sailing in the middle of an ocean with no land in sight, it's really difficult to navigate. It's really difficult to navigate. It's nearly impossible to do it without a reference point, right? You need a reference point. You need a reference point to sail the oceans out in the deep sea. And since ancient times, man, I was researching this. You research cool things, and, you know, mariners in ancient times, what did they use back then to navigate the seas? The North Star, right? The North Star, I hope I'm right. They used the North Star to navigate. There was this navigational tool that, due to its fixed position in the sky, this star, it's fixed in the sky, and the North Star, it stands almost motionless in the sky, and all of the stars of the northern sky appear to rotate around it, right? So therefore, it makes an excellent fixed point from which sailors can navigate. Now, I want you guys to hold on to that, okay? And we are in this sermon series in Psalms 1 through 8. This is week 3 of our short study called The Songs of Jesus. And man, the Psalms are a divinely inspired hymn book for the public worship of God in Israel. Oh man, and us today. You know, they were read and they were sung and they were studied and they penetrated the hearts and the minds of people as only music can do. As only music can do. You know, the Psalms, like if you really think about it, the Psalms I've talked about are like kind of like a kaleidoscope. They're like a kaleidoscope of feelings and emotions and pain and suffering and loss and victory and celebration. And they are so real and raw. They are so real and raw because life is real and raw. Life is real and raw. It's hard, man. Life is not easy. It's tough. And through the Psalms, we learn devotion to God in a real and raw life, in a real and raw world. And they lead us to feel life and to feel its harshness and to feel like its beauties. And they lead us to commit ourselves to God and to depend on God and to seek Him and to put our confidence in Him and in nothing else and nobody else. Man, but most importantly, most importantly, the Psalms, man, there's something about them that are about us, but man, we are going to miss it if we just keep it about us. The Psalms are about Jesus. The Psalms are about Jesus. They're about Him. They are the songs of Jesus. Man, Jesus, he sung these Psalms and He knew these Psalms. The Psalms were this was the book that He quoted the most in the Gospels. Jesus knew these, and these are the songs of Jesus. And today, man, we are in Psalm 3, and I'm calling this message cross-reference, pun intended. There's a pun there. Cross-reference. We like puns. My wife loves puns. She's the pun queen. Through Psalm 3, man, we're going to learn about what it means for the gospel, for the cross to be our reference point. To be our reference point in the rawness of life and the messiness of life. And we're really going to see there's like a pattern when you read most of the Psalms. You see a problem, and then you see a response, a problem, a response, and then you learn about the gospel as a reference point through the Psalms and what Jesus has done. And so let's pray, and we're going to get into Psalm 3. Father, God, thank you, Lord, for giving us a reference point, Lord. We could not navigate life. We could not navigate a relationship with you if you did not give us the cross, if you didn't give us the gospel, Lord. And I pray that we would leave here seeing the gospel, understanding the cross and its sweetness and tasting it, and aligning ourselves again around what you have done on the cross for us, Lord. Jesus died on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins, and He rose again. And that is the center of everything, Lord. Thank you for giving us this word. Thank you for giving us this song for us to sing in our hearts or minds, or maybe even sing with our mouths while we're in the kitchen or whatever it is, Lord. We thank you for this truth. And speak to us in our hearts and our minds. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So Psalm 3, I'm going to start with the first couple verses. It starts like this. It's there on the screen. It says, "O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God." So the first thing I want to point you to is the problem. We see this in the Psalms. David is facing a problem. And what's that problem? Properly and reading and interpreting the Psalms requires a lot of contextual understanding, okay? Now, when we read this psalm, it says that it's a psalm attributed to David during what he was suffering through his son, Absalom. And when you go back to 2 Samuel chapters 15 to 18, you get a ton of context about where this psalm came out of, the situation, what he was experiencing, and where it's coming out of. And if you read 2 Samuel chapters 15 to 18, you'd learn three things. Three things. The first thing you would learn if you read those chapters in 2 Samuel is that David had many foes at this point. He had many foes. He had enemies. And listen, this isn't his first rodeo being pursued by somebody. Earlier in his life, he was pursued for years by King Saul, and he suffered at the hands of Saul. So this isn't his first rodeo. Now, man, he's got kind of like this trifecta of enemies. And if you read those chapters, these enemies being Shimei, Ahithophel, and most notably his own son, Absalom. His own son, Absalom. Absalom, he led what seemed to be a successful rebellion against his own father, against David. And he turned Israel, the entire nation of Israel, against David. This is his son. Turned the nation of Israel against David. Absalom was trying to kill his father. He was trying to kill David. And he had tens of thousands of men against his father. And many of David's friends and his associates forsook him, and they joined the ranks of those who troubled him. Man, Absalom, he had whole cities prepared to kill his father if David entered one of those cities. David was surrounded on every side. He was surrounded on every side. Imagine being pursued and trying to be killed by your own son, by your own child. Absalom took everything from David. He disrespected him by living in his palace and eating his food. Think about that. Now, the second thing you would learn, if you read chapters 15 to 18 of 2 Samuel, the second thing you learn is that, the seeds of this dysfunction between David and Absalom are actually David's fault. Okay, they're actually David's fault. You would learn that David wanted Absalom's love so much that David never actually really corrected him. He never actually disciplined him properly. You could kind of like call Absalom like a spoiled brat, like a spoiled child. Man, he didn't father him properly. And this isn't going to be a sermon about fathering or any of that. You might be able to get some nuggets about that, but I'm just saying. This is the situation. He never corrected him. Even when Absalom murdered one of his brothers, David really didn't discipline him well. He didn't really discipline. David, he banished Absalom for a time, right? But he never rebuked him. And now David is fleeing to save his own life. He wanted the son's love so desperately that he didn't discipline him well or correct him well. Now, the third thing that you would learn, finally, in chapters 15 to 18 of 2 Samuel is that there's context behind this statement that we read in the first two verses. There is no salvation for him in God, what his enemies were saying. Everyone was saying that God had turned away from David, from him, that God wouldn't deliver him. In 2 Samuel chapter 16, 7 through 8, Shammai, one of his enemies, he said that God was against David and that he was getting what he deserved. All of this is happening, David. You deserve this. You deserve this. And those who said this probably didn't feel that God was unable to help David, but rather that God was unwilling to help David and to save David. They looked at David's past sin. They looked at his past sin and they figured, well, this is what he deserves from God. This is what he deserves. This is why this is happening. There is no help. And listen, the thought that God might be against him and that there is no help for him in God would be painful. That would be a painful thought to think that there is no help in God because of my past and because of my past sin. And so to recap, David had enemies and he had many people were against him, and in this case, most notably, his own son, Absalom. And it was David's fault as a father. It was David's fault as he so desperately wanted his son's love that he failed to faithfully father and discipline his son. Guys, so long story short, guys, this is a stinking mess. This is an absolute mess. Welcome to the Psalms. Welcome to the Psalms. Welcome to life. Welcome to life. Can we relate to any of this in some way? I think we can relate to some of this. Guys, it's easy to live for the acclaim of others. It's easy to live for the acclaim of others. I used to live for the acclaim of others in my previous career through my achievements, and I love the praise and the honor and the acclaim that I got through my previous career. I can still easily get caught up in it, in the acclaim of people in ministry. I can still get caught up in it if I'm not careful. Guys, also as a parent, man, it is easy to want to live for the acclaim and the love of your child, the love and the acclaim of your child, and you just kind of let them push you around because you want them to love you so much, and you don't parent them and discipline them and correct them very well. Guys, if you're a boy or a girlfriend and maybe you're dating like somebody who's not a Christian, guys, it's so easy to live for their acclaim, and you're so susceptible to compromising your faith because of maybe this girlfriend or boyfriend who doesn't believe. It's easy to compromise that. Man, if you're a kid, if you're a teenager, you're in school, you got enemies. I've been there, man. You got bullies. Man, you have enemies, right? Man, that is so common. As Christians, many are going to be against you. Many are going to be against you. They're going to be against us. We'll be caricatured and stereotyped for what we believe. Man, people are going to hate us just for saying love your enemies. Like, people hate Christians for that. Just for wanting to love your enemies. The world does not know that. The world does not know that. Guys, I have somebody in my own family, my own extended family. I don't know if she's for me or against me. I don't know. That's sad. I don't know if she's for me or against me, and that they weaponize my wife and I's faith and use our faith against us to make us feel guilty. And I'm like, what is up? That's family. That's family. I don't know if this person is for me or against me. And so what's the response? What should our response be in all this messiness? Well, let's look in the text. Let's continue on. Look what David says, and we'll just write it on out, verses 3 through 8. He says, But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept, and I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be upon your people. Look at David's response here. Look closely. Read between the lines. He says, But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head. Man, and this shift in direction, but you, O Lord. Here we see that David has a reference point. Does he not? That's the reference point. But you, O Lord. This is happening, but you. I see you and I see what you're doing. This is his reference point. David is learning that neither his son's love nor popular acclaim can serve as his worth or his security. We need that. We need that. David relocates his glory and his hope to God. Guys, we seek glory. We seek acclaim and glory through power, through wealth, through beauty, prestige, through position, title. And in this particular case, in this text, we can seek glory and acclaim through fame, through popular acclaim and family love. We seek it through that. And guys, but all these things are fleeting. All these things are fleeting. As human beings, we're fickle. Are people fickle? Yes. Guys, we're fickle. All of this can disappear. This when we get our acclaim and love from humans, ultimately, guys, it can all disappear and work against you at some point or another. Humans are fickle, but David was learning to find his glory and his security and his worth in the Lord. He was learning to do that. But David's faith, we see here, it went beyond like an intellectual exercise, right? And it moved to an experience to him. It was experiential. It was existential. It had an effect on his life. That's what happens when something goes to the heart, when something moves from the head to the heart. You can see when he says, I lay down and slept. And he says, I will not be afraid. Guys, he was experiencing this. This wasn't just in his head, it was in his heart. David enjoyed a peace and a security that allowed him to sleep at night and to wake again. David enjoyed a freedom that put any fear of man in its place. In its place. And these words, they don't come from self-will. No, they don't come from pep-talking himself. He wasn't pep-talking himself or convincing himself or persuading himself. Man, this was truth to him, and it was deep in the heart. David's faith was going beyond the intellectual, but also to the experiential. He was experiencing this. Guys, these words come from a deep security and a confidence in God through his intimate relationship with God. Relationship. It is one thing to believe in God, right, in our minds. It's one thing to believe in God in our minds, but to believe that he exists and that he can and does save you, that is a whole nother story. That is a whole nother story. It's another thing to trust him existentially and experientially, moment by moment, in the twists and the turns of life, right? Man, right here, things are good. We're in a good place, and we're hearing a sermon from me, right? We're learning about Jesus, and we're going to be lifted up during this service, but then we go back out there. Then we go back out there, and all the twists and the turns in life are going to come back at us again. They're going to come. It's going to happen to me. Man, when we go home, it's going to be bedlam with these kids, I promise you. David has learned and continues to learn to trust God existentially and experientially. These are words that we're able to utter. These things that he's saying, these are words we're able to utter when we have experienced God's forgiveness and experienced God's grace, his saving grace. These are words that we can utter when God really is our shield. When he really is our shield and our security and our worth. How? How? Man, I want this again and again and again. I want this. How? Well, that's our third point. The gospel. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Guys, the gospel is here in this text. David's words, salvation belongs to the Lord. Salvation belongs to the Lord. That is a rebuttal to the enemy's claim in the second verse, right? There is no salvation for him with God. He rebuts that. That's a rebuttal. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And saying there is no salvation for him in God, his enemies, they were basing God's help on David's moral record, on his past sin. Amen? That's where that statement came from. And not only that, by making such a statement, they're basically assigning themselves authority on salvation. They're putting themselves in the place of God. Guys, we can't make that statement about anybody. Salvation doesn't belong to us. Salvation doesn't belong to us. But David, he praised this truth that salvation doesn't belong to him and it doesn't belong to us. It belongs only to the Lord. Salvation is his program. It's not ours. It's his program. And David can say all of these things and have this security and confidence because he knows God's program is grace. Is grace. David knew something about the gospel. He knew it in part at that time. Man, Jesus hadn't come yet. The cross hadn't happened yet. But David knew something about God. No, God is a God of grace. God is a God of grace. But now we know the full story. We know how it all happens. We know the cross. Salvation is the Lord's. Salvation belongs to the Lord. He gives salvation and help through grace, through faith in the gospel of his Son Jesus, who died on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins. Man, pursued and threatened by his enemies during his ministry and being surrounded by them on the cross, you can just hear Jesus echo David's words, right? How many are my foes? Many are against me. Too many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. Guys, by faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, we have a relationship with God. And let me tell you something, religion and rules can't give you peace. Religion and rules cannot give you peace, and they cannot give you this worth and this security. Why? Because we can never live up to them. We can never be obedient perfectly. We can never live up to God's standard, and that's okay. It's okay. That's why Religion and rules can never give you peace and worth and security. David has a checkered past. Man, if you read in 1 and 2 Samuel, you would learn that. David messed up. David messed up in some pretty bad ways. Who doesn't? Who doesn't have a checkered past here? You're joking. So joking. I can say that with confidence. David has lived a life of repentance and faith. Repentance and faith and humble devotion to God. Like David, we can face so many troubles and enemies and even some of our own making, right? Some of this is David's own making. This is David's fault as a father. But it's not obedience that qualifies us for God's salvation and his help. It's a humble heart of repentance and faith. A humble heart of repentance and faith. If God's salvation and help had anything to do with our track record, guys, then there should be no help. We shouldn't even be here right now. We shouldn't even be here right now. But that's not how God works. Even despite failing in some way as a father and being consistently hated on by people around him, there is salvation and there is help in God for David, because God's help doesn't hinge on our getting everything right. It doesn't hinge on us getting everything right. If you're trying to get everything right, stop. You're going to be running on that rat wheel forever. And it's never going to work. It's never going to work. Now, there are still practical consequences for our sin that David experiences. There's practical consequences for our sin as we learn from David's life, but God is still our shield. He is still our shield. When salvation belongs to the Lord, we can rest. And when we have that in our heart, when salvation belongs to the Lord, we can rest. When salvation belongs to us, we get nothing but anxiety, nothing but unrest. We hurt ourselves, we live in shame, we live in guilt when salvation belongs to us. But when salvation belongs to the Lord, we can rest. We struggle with this, though, to one degree or another, because the gospel is not sweet to us. It's not sweet to us. Maybe it's in our head, but it's not in our heart. We haven't tasted the sweetness of the gospel, and this is why we continue to struggle with this, even as Christians. Guys, today we can create sweetness in food. We can create sweetness in food. You know, whenever I read a Diet Coke ingredients on the back, there's all this phosphorus and this, that, and guys, we can create that sweetness, right? With different chemicals and stuff like that. But in ancient times, people couldn't create sweetness in food. You could only discover it. You could only discover it. The gospel is like that. That's how the gospel is. We can't create the sweetness that it brings. Man, we can't manufacture that sweetness through rules or obedience or anything like that. Guys, we can't create that sweetness. We can only discover it. But to discover that sweetness of the gospel, we have to explore it. We have to explore it and turn it over on its side and work at it and look at it from different angles, right? That's how we discover the sweetness of the gospel. We have to work at it and think about it and be vulnerable in receiving its counsel. That's what a sermon basically is. We're just looking at the gospel from a new angle today. And then next Sunday, we're going to look at the gospel and explore it from a new angle. And then the next Sunday, we're going to look at the gospel from the next angle. And then the next Sunday, we're exploring it. We're turning it over on its side. And it gets sweeter and sweeter as we discover the truth of the gospel, of the cross. That's what personal Bible study should be. You're just, the next day, you're just looking at it from a different angle. Okay, what's this text say? How does the gospel relate to this text? Guys, the sweeter the gospel becomes, the greater influence it'll have as our reference point. As our reference point. David was one who was always on a trail of discovery of God's character and his ways. God's grace was his reference point. I want to conclude on a short story. My father-in-law comes from a farming family in Sydney, Ohio. Yeah, really interesting and cool. I'm totally not a farmer. Man, if the world goes downhill and we have to start growing food, I'm not going to be your guy. Yeah, I'm not going to be your guy. Well, there's a story of a father who sent his son to prepare a field, reminding him to till straight lines, and he told his son, select an object on the far side of the field and just plow straight to it. It's simple. Select an object and just plow straight for it. Keep focused on that point. Whatever it is you pick in the backgrounds, focus on it and just plow straight at it. And later when the father checked on the boy's progress, there wasn't a straight furrow to be found. There wasn't a straight furrow, a straight line. Every row was uneven and wavy. And the father said, I thought I told you to select an object and plow toward it. And the boy said, I did. But the rabbit kept hopping. The rabbit kept hopping. Guys, if we're looking to popular acclaim or the love of others, even family, for our ultimate worth and security, we are plowing to a hopping rabbit. Amen. We're plowing to a hopping rabbit. Don't chart your course according to the acclaim and the love of others. If you do, you will make the mistake that the farmer's son made. You make the gospel. You make the cross. You make God's grace your reference point. That's your reference point. Be content and ultimately pleased with God's acclaim and God's love in Christ, and not the acclaim and the love of others. But once we lose that reference point, we're going to sail off course. We're going to sail off course. Guys, when you look at that cross, that's God's love. This is what Jesus says about me. Right? God said to Jesus when he was baptized, "This is my son with whom I am well pleased." But when we believe the gospel, God says the same thing about us. This is my beloved son or daughter with whom I am well pleased. And that's our reference point. We can rest in that. We can rest in that. If God is our shield and if he is a greater glory to you than anything in the world or anybody in the world, then we can handle it. We can handle it when we're opposed by man, sometimes even our own family, with poise, with patience, and with love. Let's pray.